realized I was spraying rubbing alcohol on paint.
Oh, nice. And that was caught in recording. So you're lucky on that one.
Oh, but, well, I mean, it's all good. What's going on, folks? How's it going? Tim, as always, being Tim and, a douchebag, but it's all good. Tonight, we have Craig Campbell of Nerdburger Games and podcast and architectural delights and all sorts of things.
Architectural delights. Is that anything like afternoon delights, just a little bit more structured?
There are a lot of architectural terms that sound sexual but aren't. So you could go with that kind of stuff. Self-drilling holes, self-tapping screws, cock bead.
Erect.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything, damn near anything you say about putting up structure.
Yeah.
You need to make sure it's nice and firm.
Yep.
All righty. So Greg, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing all right. Doing good. I'm just one game under my belt, a second game underway, a third game I'm tinkering with. As we record this, it's the Wednesday evening. I guess you could technically say this is Gen Con.
Yeah.
By Wednesday evening, there's always a lot of people doing stuff.
Yeah, I'd count this as Gen Con. So yeah. We're just 3 sick, sad bastards that decided not to go.
Yeah, so. No kidding. But it's the 50th year for Gen Con. It's going to be incredibly crazy. I'm going to be bombed as you are, I'm sure, on social media. I'm already getting bombed by just tons of news and pictures already. It's going to continue all weekend. It'll be kind of like I was there.
Except not.
Basically,
you don't have to do all the bullshit.
Yeah, I can sit in my air-conditioned apartment and have what I want to eat at what time I want to eat it. And I can talk to you fine gentlemen.
And you don't have 60,000 people, fighting with you.
Right, yeah. But the important part of it is he knows that he gets to talk with the Skirmish Supremacy team. So that right there is worth far more than the price of admission to Gen Con, which you can't get into anyway. So I guess what he's saying is beggars can't be choosers at this point. Yeah. Awesome. So you said that you're working on a new project.
Yeah. Well, let's start chronologically here. I want to check with you. Did you get your book, Nick?
I haven't gotten my book yet, though. I checked the mailbox and I haven't. I didn't have any mail in it, which is odd. And I think maybe my nephew got it, and he didn't tell me about it yet. So he may be hiding it.
Yeah, because you guys backed Murders and Acquisitions back in May of last year. And then you got distracted, apparently. Something shiny flew by. And you didn't order your... because you had backed for the, at the level to get a physical book, and you hadn't backed that, or you hadn't picked it up. So I guess it's if you don't have it yet, it's en route.
Yes, it should be.
I hope you enjoy that.
I believe I got the shipping notice the other day.
Okay, there you go.
The backstory to this is Craig, messaged me the other day, or emailed me and went, hey guys, I feel like chatting with you again. And I was like, oh, cool. We actually have a spot open right at Gen Con. And, he's like, all right. And I said something about, I hadn't gotten around to ordering my book yet. And he's like, before we talk about anything else, you need to do the... and yep. Even when I tried to distract him with other things, he's like, no, not till you order the book. It is happening right now.
Yeah. Well, you paid for it. Absolutely.
Nice.
So yeah, that all went well. I turned it over. I made some bold claims during the Kickstarter of saying I was going to turn it over by the end of the year. 7 months turnaround or so. I did it. I got it out before Christmas. At least people had the PDFs by Christmas time. While all of that was going on, while I was kickstarting and then doing the production work and laying everything out and getting artwork and then eventually getting it out, I was also tinkering in the background with another game. And then this year, as of about January or so, that went full bore into playtesting and has been in continuous playtesting through now, and it's going to continue for at least a little bit longer. That game is called Capers. Capers, and it's a superpowered game of 1920s gangsters. So think of Al Capone and Elliot Ness and Lucky Luciano and all those folks, and what happens if some of them have sort of superpowers? They're not like there's no Superman, there's no Hulk, there's no Thor, there's no like ultra powerful, nigh unto indestructible character. It's a little more kind of low key, a little more like you see with kind of the mid run of the middle tier of the X-Men type characters. No impossible to kill Wolverine.
Right.
But, you could have a character that, shoots a heat beam that's a little bit like Cyclops, but wearing a pinstriped suit and he has a Tommy gun in a violin case.
That's nice. So it definitely lends itself to very much like that pulpy adventure feel where, you run into the villain that happens to be like all barrel chested and you're like, okay, he's strong enough to punch through this door. And he's just that strong.
Yeah, well, and I make the joke too, like a speedster in this game is fast enough to overtake a car, but at the same time, in the 1920s, a Model T doesn't really go that fast, and it especially doesn't do it on a dirt road where you're traveling to get to a little hidey hole speakeasy that's out in the middle of nowhere, or where somebody's doing some illegal brewing or distilling or whatever. So. There'll be an illustration in the book that'll be like a speedster running alongside of a Model T type car, but it's not like they're going 120 miles an hour.
Right.
But he's fast enough.
Yeah, they're maybe doing 40.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. So I immediately, as you talked about superpower, especially Al Capone, there's a series of books. Ian something, I think, is the author. But anyways, in the series of books, one of them has where something happens where basically dead souls are coming back and kind of taking possession of people. They basically, it's science fiction, and so one of them happens to be Al Capone, and he so comes back and has not, superpowers, but he can do some pretty cool things. Like everyone in the series of books flies around in ships that are circles, because that's the only way to go FTL. Or it's not circles, spheres.
Spheres, okay, sure.
So he walks up to one and he touches it, and it turns into a kind of pulpy rocket ship instead that can still do all the same things.
Like a Jules Verne looking thing.
Exactly. So, you said that, and that my head went immediately to, Al Capone just walking around going, I want it like this.
Yeah, well, Al Capone in this game, he's in there. I know basically what he's going to be. I actually have another designer who's going to be writing up all of the Chicago stuff. That'll be actually starting next month. He's going to get started. And so I kind of know where I'm going with Al Capone, but it's a portion of it's going to be up to him. I'm going to let him design.
Okay.
But Al Capone will be there. And so, and actually, like historically, Capone's mentor, boss early in the Prohibition era was a fellow named Johnny Torrio. And in order to shake things up a little bit in the period, because just a quick aside, I don't know how much you know about 1920s and the gangsters and all that stuff, but the bulk of the interesting personalities that we know of from that era are like Italian and Irish guys in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And there's not a lot of mention, at least not in the big, known personalities of women or people of other ethnicities and so forth. It's just all those Irish and Italian mobster guys. So I'm shaking things up, and Johnny Torrio is actually Giada Torrio. So, Chicago's being run by a woman, and that's Al Capone's boss, at least until such time as, if the GM wants to say, okay, now it's time for Torrio to retire or to get offed by Capone and shift the power structure in Chicago, you can do that. And I've done it, with a few other historical figures, and then, and then me and other designers are making sure that there's plenty of other options for things. So it's not just dudes in their 30s. White dudes in their 30s.
Right, yeah.
That's
which is cool. It adds a little bit more of a flavor to it. Because you're right. Everybody thinks of Al Capone and even people like Bugsy Siegel and things like that, where it's just a bunch of Irish and Italian dudes running around.
Yeah, and I want anybody to open up the book and flip through it and find a character that they can identify with in an illustration. It's more welcoming. It makes and it grows the hobby. Gaming is has historically been very strongly white guy oriented, but that's changing quite a bit, and it grows the hobby, and it keeps it alive, and means more games and more fun and more cons, and why not support that?
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about that. You're talking about going through the book and picking out characters. So, as far as that goes, character creation, things like that, is it pretty easy to do, or are you going to have pre-mades? What's the process behind it?
Well, there'll be pre-generated characters that are available as part of the Kickstarter, I'm sure. Like I did with Murders and Acquisitions, I'll do the same thing with Capers. There'll be a bunch of PDF support stuff, like pre-gen characters and some adventures and things like that. But character creation it's for me, I can create a character in 5 minutes. But here's the deal. If you look at the index of powers, you look at the list, and they're all pretty self-explanatory what they are. And you pick a power, and then you go in there and you make a character who has that power without getting into every little detail of that power and looking at 10 or 20 other powers. You can put a character together in 10 minutes. If you want to, really analyze things, you could spend an hour and a half creating a character by reading through multiple powers and picking and choosing. But it's a question of what the player wants to do, and whether where's the threshold for analysis paralysis, where they find I've got 5 powers that I think are all really great, and now I'm weighing them against each other, and which one do I go with? Well, maybe just play a pre-gen until you figure the system out, until you learn more about the powers, or just pick one. Make a character with that power. If you don't dig it, make another one next time.
Right. I mean, we are talking about 1920s gangsters. It's not like you can't just get off and make another character.
Yeah, or, just write the character, even if you don't get killed, just write the character out. Or have the character develop that other power, so now you've got 2, and because now you've had the time to figure out, this power is cool too, but I didn't, get into the weeds on it. But at the same time, I tried to keep it reasonable. Like, no power takes up more than about a half a page to describe all of the little nuances of what it can do. And that's even, there's only a handful of powers that get that long. There's plenty that are less than a half a page of information.
So roughly how many powers are you going for right now?
I've got about 40. There's a lot of little variations within them. That's one thing you'll find. It's not like you pick a power and it just does this one thing. Each power is set up to have a standard effect, and then there's ways to boost it into doing other related things. And then the boosts that you choose, you start when you first take a power, you get a few boosts, and then if you advance the power, you gain another boost each time as well. So you can vary you can play a character that. Oh, let me think. What's some of the better there's a power in there called weather manipulation that is literally just a whole list of everything Storm can do.
Right.
Which is everything regarding weather. And you can pick and choose. You could have 2 different characters that are both weather manipulators that don't duplicate at all. That they both do completely different things, but they're just both weather related.
Cool. So in a way it has like a core set of skills and abilities, but like the weather related in this case is just that's the special effect that stacks with the rules. I guess you want to call it that.
Right. What do you want the weather effect to do? Do you want it to, call lightning, summon up sleet, make fog, make a heat wave,
right?
Make a thunder crack, a sonic style attack. There's a lot you can do it. And then there's other powers that are a little more straightforward, like any of your beam powers, like a heat beam, a cold beam. That like a cold beam, its core ability is you shoot a blast of cold. But then there's some of the boost things. There are things where you can bump the damage, you can get a better range, you can hit 2 targets instead of just 1. You can encase something in ice. You can create an ice slick. You can do the classic Iceman thing of making the ramp to slide around on.
Nice.
So they're all in there.
I would totally use that power in the 20s.
well, right now I'm thinking of a bootlegger. He's trying to run away from the cops, and all of a sudden he decides to ice slick his way over something with his little Model T. It's bouncing along.
It's not even that. Like, he just does the ice slick, and he keeps like all the beer with him, and like the beer's just staying cold the whole time he travels. Like, that to me is just efficient.
As he's driving, you see him sticking his hand out the window and just ice spraying out it.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
You do it all out of a panel van, and you have like a traveling speakeasy. Or no matter where you go, you've got a cold one you can sell.
Look.
Yeah, see that right there. I would totally make that character. Now
I was like, wow. Yeah, suddenly I know what character I'm playing.
And then there's the rules are set up such too that you can instead play the good guys. You can play members of law enforcement, Department of Justice agents, cops, sheriffs, bounty hunters. So you can play that game too, and so that becomes a little bit more of the, like if you play the gangster, it's a little more of the anti-hero game.
Yeah.
And if you play the law enforcement, it's a little bit more of the like actual superhero game. Like you're out there to enforce the Volstead Act and make sure those all those naughty people aren't distributing and making and transporting alcohol.
Which makes sense. I could see that game going either way. I definitely wouldn't want to see this game because you kind of want the tropes, but not really, I guess is a good way to put it. Like you want to be able to play the gangster. You don't want it to be like, you're rehashing Dick Tracy where it's like, we're all good guys and these are bad guys. And you don't cross that line. Like you are a good guy. I think a game like that, people are going to want to be like, you know what, let's all play the gangsters this time.
Yeah, and I tried to do it in such a way that there's a gray area for either version. If you're playing a Fed or if you're playing a gangster, there's a gray area in there. Like the gangsters, you might have a code of honor that you follow while you're still breaking the law. As a Fed, corruption and alcohol and prostitution and gambling and racketeering and everything is so rampant during the 20s. You're kind of fighting a losing battle. So there you see a lot of stories you could develop where the Feds are, breaking the law occasionally a little bit too in order for the greater goal.
Right.
Because they're never going to stop at all, but it's not about winning the war. It's about fighting the battle. So,
yep.
There's a gray area, or at the same time, you can just play straight on, everybody's playing straight-laced. We are all Superman style, truth, justice, and the American way. Stop those bootleggers and rum runners and just play it straight like that. They can all every single character can be 6'4" with a square jaw.
Yeah,
or the female equivalent of that, which I suppose may very well be 6'4" and a square jaw.
Her name's Hilda. She comes from Sweden. All right, so let's see. You mentioned 20. Ah, man, there was another question in there. Where'd it go?
I'll give you time.
You'll give me time. That's awesome. No, shoot. What was it? Because I'm trying to think back to what we were talking about. We were talking about when the with the cops and all that, and you gave some quandaries.
See, backing up, we were talking, cops and gangsters in gray areas, and what all the powers did, hitting the tropes, but not getting too deep on the tropes. Like one of the things I made sure to do in the game was, like, a non-superpowered character with a Tommy gun is a threat.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Then that does kind of play into it because and it was actually a little bit back when we were talking about characters and all that, and you mentioned you can have two different weather manipulators. So there's all the powers of storm, but they can each be different. And so I guess the question that I have there is, how do they end up being different than storm? So there's powers that you can take. I guess it's how many powers can you take when you're creating the character, and moving on from there, and developing them.
Well, basically for each power, there's a standard effect, and then there's that whole series of boosts. And when you take a level, when you take your first rank in a power, you automatically get 3 boosts. So you gain some versatility, some little interesting things you can do with it. And then every time you gain an additional rank, the standard effect gets better in some way, and you gain 1 more boost. And you can pick and choose those boosts as you go. And there's always more boosts than you could possibly take. So you're not going to top out the character and have your maximized character and another person's maximized characters will always be the same. There's always like 1 or 2 extra boosts beyond what you could top out at.
Right. So
the 2 weather manipulators, when I said they're different, I'm not saying they're different from Storm necessarily. They're different from each other.
Right.
They could both be taking different sets of boosts.
Right. And I got that. I was just wondering, if basically, is there a limit on what I can take so that I don't end up as Storm? It's that kind of, if I have this tree, eventually I'm going to maximize the tree, and then me and Joe might have started 2 different guys, and followed 2 different paths, but at the end, if we've maxed out our trees, we're going to have the same character
or be pretty similar, right? Well. You could end up doing that if that's the direction it goes, but there's nothing that says you have to max out that power. There are other powers to take. You can have multiple powers, and while each time you take a rank in a power, it gets a little better. It's very much a linear progression. It's not this big sweeping curve of like the only way I'm going to have the super character is if I take 5 ranks of this power. No, I can take 3 of this and 2 of that and 1 of that over the course of the whole run of the character and still have, plenty of cool stuff going on and actually be more versatile.
Okay.
Just for that.
Right. And that's definitely a, true thing there. But you were saying that, also, even if you did keep going, at the theoretical end or whatever, you most likely wouldn't have a chance to take all the perks.
Right. There'd be a couple that you wouldn't be able to take because you'll top out. And admittedly, if you take 2 weather manipulators to the highest level, they're going to look pretty similar. But at lower and middling levels, they can be still very different. And that's not to say that you can't, house rule in a couple more boosts if you think of something that I didn't think of. I mean, once the game's in your hands, it's your game. House rule it up the wazoo, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there are powers that I specifically chose not to include in the game. I made design decisions to not include them. You might decide you really want them in the game, and then you can generate those.
I mean, everyone should be Magneto.
Nope, not in this game.
Yeah, you can't stop us then.
Yeah, the problem is that the magnetism control is incredibly powerful.
Right.
That's the reason Magneto is so powerful, is that is a incredibly useful and powerful ability. There's also no mind control, so there's no Professor X either.
Oh, no Professor X?
There's ways to manipulate people mentally a little bit, but here's the deal with mind control. And I made this design decision, and you can house rule up a mind control power if you want to. My opinion of mind control in role-playing games. It's great when the players control the bad guys. The players love that. But the minute I bust out a bad guy that takes control of your character for a 45-minute long combat, you're going to be pissed off. And you're going to sit there the whole time going, this sucks.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely.
So I didn't bother. I said I toyed around with it for a little bit. I looked at different ways of like, okay, well, how can they resist it? Like, can you take control of somebody and then maybe they get resistance checks to try to break free? And then it's like, well, now you're not moving the story forward because it's just this guy who's constantly going, get out of my head!
I'm gonna get you this time.
That's not filling the scene with action. That becomes this internal thing that you can represent well in a comic panel. You can represent well in a movie, but does it really need to be role played out? And if you want to add that power in, if you want to do, or if you want to, I mean, by all means. But I just chose, I don't want to create any powers that if I use them against the players, it's just going to tick them off.
Yeah, I can see that, because the one thing in a role-playing game, you don't ever want to take the agency away from the player. And when you're just like, oh, nope, I got you mind controlled, I'm going to control your character this scene, then it's just kind of like, well, why am I here?
Yeah. And one of the things that I always did, like for example, with Dungeons and Dragons, there are certain spells that I know like really cheese players off like that. That kind of, and there's things going back. There's mind control spells. Another good one is level draining stuff, like old school second edition enervation stuff that permanently drained levels, things like that. My opinion has always been when I run those games is I tell the players, okay, those spells are available. I'm not going to take them until you take them. So if you want to start getting your character mind controlled, take the mind control spell because then it's coming right back at you. And you know what? Most of the time, the players don't choose that stuff. They say, "Hey, I got 100 other options. Why would I take this thing that's just going to bite me in the ass at some point?"
Right, right. I can totally appreciate that mentality right there. That's a good way of saying, of creating a ability to help control the game without just outright going no. Which can create that little bit of discontent. It's you take it and it opens it up for me. Do you really want to take that?
It's funny you bring up the whole level draining and things like that, because that's one thing I've never understood out of the years and years I've played Dungeons and Dragons is because of the fact that even in the way that you gain level, it's done through experience, which means you're learning something. So what happens? You've got mind control spells, you've got forget spells. So then when I get hit with the level drain spell, does that mean I just forgot everything? Is it an amnesia spell?
If I'm a spellcaster, did I suddenly unlearn that spell I learned this level?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, in reality, why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be you're being caused some sort of amnesia or that section of your brain's being manipulated?
Because they already have those spells. That's the weird part about it is they have all of those spells that you could think of, and then they're like, oh yeah, by the way, this one just gets rid of levels.
So I think early on it was okay, here's another way to attack, so to speak, to attack the characters, to challenge them is by what can you do? You can deal damage, you can hold them, you can charm them, you can stun them, you can knock them down, you can do all these different things. And one of the things you can do is you can take away levels. And in more recent versions of D&D, enervation or quote unquote level draining isn't permanent level draining anymore. It's just you get hit with some penalties, you take a penalty that's across the board until you manage to get rid of the effect, rather than outright losing spells. Because I think over the years they've realized that kind of sucks. I mean, it's there's plenty of other options. That one doesn't need to be a permanent level drain anymore.
Right, and because there's really nothing worse than putting in all that time and then suddenly losing all those levels. Well, there is something worse when you totally do what the DM told you to do, but the whole time he was fucking with you, and when you finally come out of that dungeon all successful and shit, he has your guy arrested and thrown in prison for life for murder.
Yeah, and you're 20 XP from the next level, and then you get hit by a mummy.
Yeah,
or a lich or something else, and now you get drained down to halfway between the previous two levels. You didn't just lose a level; you lost a level and a half.
Yeah,
I had that happen to me one time playing second edition D&D, and I told the DM, "Don't ever do that again." That's just a dick move.
Yeah, that's how you get people to rage quit your games.
Yeah, absolutely. And if this had been just somebody that I had just kind of knew from playing, I might have. It was a friend, and I said, okay, you made a mistake. I'm willing to forgive you. We're not going to do that again, and I'm never going to do it to you in my game, so it's a fair trade.
Nice. So speaking of the game wise, we talked about character creation and the powers and all that, what kind of a system are you going to be using for capers?
Okay. The system uses a standard deck of poker-style playing cards with 2 jokers. It's basically it's kind of like a press your luck system. I like to think of it as you're actually kind of gambling on your trait check. You have a trait, or you have there's 6 traits, and each of them has a rank from 1 to 3, and they can be higher if you've got the powers. And then there's other ways to have those traits have that bumped up a little bit by having specialty skill kind of areas. But let's say you're making an agility check and you've got a rank of 2. It means you've got 2 cards to flip. You can flip up to 2 cards and you can stop at any time.
Okay.
Now, when you flip a card, the pip value from 2, 3, 4 on up to ace is always high. That's kind of that's the target score that you're hitting. That's the target number that you're shooting for. So you might need an 8 for something relatively moderate. You might need a jack or better for something more difficult. The suit of the card flipped is the degree of success or degree of failure. So you might flip a king of clubs, and a king is a really good solid success. You're probably successful, but a clubs is the least successful. So you barely succeeded. You might gamble to flip another card in the hope of getting hearts or spades with a success. But if you end up with a fail card, then you fail. And there's botches with, if you fail with with clubs, it's a botch. If you succeed with spades, it's a boon. It's like, extra good. You do well. And then the suit or the color, depending, when it's weapon damage, it's the damage is either going to be based on the color or the suit. So you've kind of effectively got a D2 and a D4 kind of built in to each card flip. And then there's like a pool of points that you've got to manage over the course of a game session called your Moxie. And those points, that pool will go up and go down. You'll spend those points, and you can spend the points on spend Moxie on a bunch of different things, but one of them is to give yourself an extra card.
Gotcha.
On a check.
So in a way, the suits kind of make it to where it's like, okay, you either succeed and fail. So it's a success failure system based upon suit, but then certain suits will be like, I succeed or fail or I succeed or fail, but. Right. Where it's like, I succeeded, but this happens, or I succeeded and I also get this too.
Right. Like a success. If you succeed with clubs, which is the lowest suit in the game, it's called a complication. So you succeed, you do your thing, but the GM or even the player, if they have a good idea, like there's a complication, maybe, something that's going to mess with the rest of the scene in some way. If you succeed with spades, that's the best one. That's a boon. It's extra good. You do more damage, or you perform the skill better. If you fail with clubs, that's a botch. Something bad happens. If you fail with spades, it's called oh crap! What I name the damn thing? Encouragement? No, it's something else. But it's basically you gain a point of moxie that you can use, but you have to use it on your next turn. It's called motivation. That's what it was.
Okay.
Like here's this point of moxie that you can spend, but you have to use it on your next turn or it's lost. So it's kind of, you failed, but I'm motivating you to try something cool because you've got an extra point to play with.
Okay, cool. So in a way, it's kind of like you're building up momentum where it's like, you go into the room and you kick these 2 guys, in the chest and send them flying across the room. And then you did it so well, you still have like that extra action or like that extra momentum to.
Well, you get the momentum if you fail.
Yeah, even then, like, okay, you kicked the guy, but like you just came into the room so fast that it's like you're still like flipping the desk to create like the barrier from bullets.
Right. And now you're thinking, okay, I tried to kick you and it didn't work, but I really want to kick you.
Yeah.
So came in with the plan of kicking him. When you went to kick him, he was really a lot bigger than what he looked like outside the door.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's because you find out that you just had terrible depth perception. He looked tiny from 10 feet back.
Yeah.
Now all I can think of is, those comedy movies where, the guy really can't fight, but he hits the guy and the guy just kind of looks and smiles at him. He's like, I'm going to do something else. The plucky hero, whatever you want to call it, whatever trope it is.
So, nice. It's... And there's a little more depth to the system than that, but there's ways to gain little advantage perks, kind of or suffer some sort of disadvantage. But that's the basic system. Is it's flipping cards, and you can kind of stop when you want. And I found that it's made for a very engaging system. Like with dice, it's usually okay, I rolled a hit. Do I hit? Yes. Okay, now I roll damage. This is how much damage I've done, and you move on. Or I roll to hit and I fail. Okay, and now I'm done. And you might have a saving throw or a hit location or something like that that's figured in there as well. But like the thing I've enjoyed most about the system, I wasn't sure I was going to play when I first developed it. Now it's kind of like playing cards. I discovered that, it makes for a very engaging thing. Like, people are paying attention to what cards other people are flipping, because they're watching to see, like, are they going to pull an ace, for example. And there's a little bit of the potential for card counting to go on. You can kind of pay attention to what's been cycling through your deck before you get forced into a reshuffle.
Right.
And you kind of gamble on that too. You think to yourself, well, yeah, there's a lot of high cards still in there. I'm going to try something pretty amazing and hope I pull one of those.
So as far as that goes, does each player have their own deck, or is it a shared deck for everybody?
Everybody has their own deck. The GM has their own deck.
Okay, cool.
That does definitely make it that much more interesting. It's everyone playing blackjack with themselves, but against everyone else.
Kinda. Not for 21, just for high card. It's war.
Right.
You're playing war.
True.
Nice. So as far as that goes, like, we kind of covered like the core of the system. I take it damage is a pretty simple thing, especially since you're still kind of talking somewhat pulpy 4-color heroes. I can't imagine the damage is like some hyper advanced, super complicated chart system. It's just like, I could take this many hits before I go down.
They are literally called hits.
Okay.
And you have a certain number of them. Yep.
Excellent.
And there's ways to improve them. You can make yourself tougher as you go. But yeah, it's real straightforward. I originally had hits and wits, so you had like physical damage and mental damage, and that kind of got harder to track. I found, like, I had playtest GMs that were coming back saying, I've got all these people that are in you're tracking 2 different health tracks, and it's just a little bit too much. So I tinkered and I looked at it and I figured, okay, we're just going to roll this all into hits. Because it was kind of like, if you had somebody that had mental attacks, you couldn't really take somebody out with wits unless you had multiple characters that were doing mental attacks.
Okay.
Because one character just couldn't whittle that person, whittle the adversary down fast enough. And so I had started kind of coming up with ways that, finding all the different ways I could do that with wits. And then it was just like, well, now I'm just adding a whole bunch of other things. Like, if everybody takes stuff that affects hits, and then guns only shoot, hit you and deal physical damage. So, dumped it. Went all just one wound track, hit point track.
Which makes sense, because you can kind of roll it all together, even if somebody's got like some mental stun attack, right? Like, it's still going to weaken you.
Yep.
So, yeah, just put it all together. So it's like, okay, I get hit twice by mental stun, and then he shoots me in the face.
Well, and the thing about hits is it's akin to hit points in D&D, where, hits is an abstraction. In part, it is physical wounds. In part, it's exhaustion. In part, it's determination. It's all sorts of things. I mean, I went so far as to, like, in the game, your hits score is based on your resilience, and it's also based on your charisma. I mean, it's based on, like, just pumping yourself up mentally and just continuing to press forward, no matter, even though you're getting your ass kicked.
Right.
So you can actually have, mental focused characters, social focused characters that aren't just glass cannons. They actually have some hits. They can hang in there.
Right. So it's kind of like, you always hear about, like, the big tough, bodybuilder type with the glass jaw, but then you got the wiry old man that just, could take a broken bottle to the face and keep going. Cause he's like, is that all you got, Sonny?
Yeah.
He's sitting there rocking back and forth, and you're like, he's got to be falling. He's got to fall. There's no way. And he's still there, like, is that it? That's
just years of pickled piss and vinegar is what that is.
Well, I kind of imagine it like, there are characters you've seen characters in movies and stuff where they take punishment, and it's physical punishment, but they overcome it more through just sheer force of will.
Yeah.
Like, I have to stay up for this. I have to keep going. And that's what that's meant to reflect. So you can build a tough character, so to speak, in a bunch of different ways.
Right.
That's awesome. I definitely like that idea. And, I like the simplicity of it as well. And not having to track, 2 or 3 things.
So when it comes down to the hits, I take it that it is very similar to a hit point system where you don't just, like, everybody's got like 4 hits and then you're down. It's, everybody will have, like, somebody might have like 20 hits. Somebody might have 10.
Right. The way it's set up is that characters that have powers are called capers. There's a whole story behind that. You can read it in the game book, where the name came from. But they're the characters with powers. There are also characters who don't have superpowers but are somehow exceptional. They're literally in the game called exceptionals. And then there are regulars. And the regulars are, Joe Schmo, shop owner, hobo, whatever. And those guys, they have 3, 4, 5 hits. Exceptionals and capers tend to be more in the teens. And if they take the right powers and things, they can get up into the 20s. So you can have... your powered up character that's going to, knock down a mook every time he punches him. Like, just one mook after another. 3 hits, 3 hits, 3 hits. As long as you're not rolling, flipping cards terrible, as long as you're getting at least a couple of points of damage out there, you're knocking somebody down with every punch.
Nice. So in a way, like it translates very similar to, say, D&D hit points, where it's like, oh, I did this much damage, therefore this guy goes down.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So it's a very simple. It's a simple health system for people that are kind of used to a lot of those kind of games.
Exactly.
You're not trying to reinvent the wheel.
And you hit it you hit it on the head. It's got a pulp aspect to it. It's got a cinematic aspect to it. It's like, the character's at full power until they're not.
Yeah.
There's no death spiral.
Yeah. And I don't know. I've played a lot of different role-playing games, and there's certain games where it's like that death spiral really makes sense if you're trying to do like your really gritty combat's a very combat's a serious thing. But at the same time, if you're playing more of your heroic style game, you just want to go until you're not. You just kind of want to, kind of put it all out there. And if you're left with like 1 hit point, but you won, that's all that matters. It's like, okay, we won. Now I got to go heal for a little bit, but you know what? I'm not holed up for 6 months in a hospital with 2 broken arms and shot 3 times. And
what an exciting superhero you are.
Yeah, exactly. What's your new power? I'm Vegetable Man.
I had one big fight with my nemesis, and now the next 4 issues I'm healing.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, that would be bad. Capers Intensive Care issue 1 through 4.
Oh, please. Hey, there's plenty of games out there. You want that gritty experience, they're out there. And it's one of those things that when you're designing a game like this, every so often you get a person that questions, a design decision. And, I hate to say it, but sometimes, I'll explain what the decision is. And then if they press me, sometimes it just becomes, well, this is the game I wanted to make. Why did I do it that way? Because this is the way I wanted to do it. And you can take that system if you buy the book, and now the game becomes yours. And if you want to ratchet up a hit location system and deal with called shots and penalties for wounds and things, by all means, go for it. If that's the game, if you think that is, if that's the game experience you want, you like everything else about capers except that there's the health system isn't what you wanted. Yeah. It's pretty straightforward to take a thing where you've got like 15 hits and just say, okay, well at 10 and at 5, you suffer some sort of penalty. Not that hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And on top of that, it's something that if people wanted to add it, after the fact, they could easily do it. So, yep. It's not like you are obligated as the designer to do it by any stretch. Again, like with anything, people are going to make games what they make it. That's why D&D has been so successful with people having their own homebrew campaign systems. I mean, you go to conventions or talk on forums or whatnot, and almost everybody's got their own campaign system.
Yeah, at the very least, somebody's damn near every group out there playing D&D, except for the people that are playing like Adventurers League where they have to play rules as written. Everybody's got at least one house rule. I guarantee you.
No.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, that's I'm trying to think of what ours was.
And I try to,
house rules.
I've got a few optional rules in there for things that you might want to, for different ways to do things, but I try not. I overdid the optional rule thing a little bit. I feel like on Murders and Acquisitions, but that game was also very much a toolbox. Like it was just like here's a whole bunch of things that you can hit bash together to create different play experiences. Whereas Capers has a very specific, it's in a specific era. It's a specific kind of genre of style of cinematic gangsters and G-men kind of thing. So I didn't go quite as crazy with the optional stuff. Most of the optional stuff is kind of there for GMs,
right,
to make their life a little easier if they want to go a little simpler on something.
Yeah, I can see that. So as far as that goes, obviously we talked about system, we talked about character creation, we talked about all that. It sounds like the game, for the most part, it's still being play tested, but it's close to being done.
I would say it's in its final rounds. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how long it's going to take. It's going to take as long as it's going to take.
Sure.
But I mean, I'm waiting on some feedback from people this week through the weekend, assuming I get everything that I need to get. And if what I'm waiting on is similar to what I've already received for this last round of playtesting, I'm one round away from just fine tuning.
Right. Okay. So at that point,
if all goes well, yeah,
so we're talking like 80% if we were to like assign it a number.
Yeah, I'd say we're 80% on the rules. Yeah, and now it's the GM section is written. There's two whole backdrop cities are written. You've got a whole bunch of information on Atlantic City. You've got a whole bunch of information on New York. Chicago is going to get written soon. I've got another person that's going to write little blurbs about a few other cities, just like, you can take your characters to Cincinnati for a session, and here's some, here's 5 interesting things about Cincinnati. And then there's also a what's called the GM's Toolbox, which is at the tail end of things, where I took I had a buddy of mine who's he's a game designer, little kind of part-time on the side stuff, but he also is a big comic book person. So he went through and looked at some of the tropes of comic books and found the ones that could be meshed into this game a little bit, like super prisons, and things like alternate Earths, where on this other version of Earth, this is how superpowers played out, or this other major event happened, or something. And so there's the potential for quote unquote planar travel if you want to go a little more over the top.
You want to get really crazy with it, is what you're saying? So instead of it being
dimensions,
a distillery in someone's basement, as it takes you into a mirror dimension.
Well, it's the one that I love to talk about is what I think he referred to it. He titled it Omega Earth, which it's a version of the world where because it's set in the 1920s, so it's right after World War I. In this other world, in Omega Earth, World War I didn't happen. Aliens showed up, and everybody fought the aliens, and that was World War I. And so now there's this, and we won, but now there's this, remnants of alien technology that's left over, and it's not this huge thing. It's not, you're not really intended to play like a long-term campaign there, but you can go over there and get a laser whip or a flying car that will fly 100 feet above the ground. And it's all very Buck Rogers kind of sci-fi.
Yeah.
The aliens are like literally like like the big bug-eyed skinny-bodied aliens and.
Excellent. Awesome. No, that things like that can be fun. I do like the idea of, extra dimension distill, or the still. You got to turn the handle, 3/4 of the way this way, 3/4 of the way that way, half this way, and then push open.
And then the portal opens.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now, if you turn it, a full turn that way, something really bad happens.
Right. Well, and it's laid out in such a way that you don't even have to have characters take planar travel powers. There is one in the game, in case you want a character to be able to be kind of in charge of that, so to speak.
Right.
But you can also just, as the GM, you can just say exactly what you guys are talking about. It's just like you go over and you trace a door shape into this wall in the storeroom at the speakeasy, and it opens a door into the other
wherever
realm.
Yeah the Buzaro world, where everybody's always drunk.
Buzaro. Oh my god.
So now I need a guy that always carries around a bag and always pulls apples out of it, except for one adventure where it's oranges. And when everyone asks me why I'm eating oranges, I just say I felt like a change this time.
Oh God!
And anyone know that reference?
No, I don't.
No, that's not striking a chord with me.
Raymond Feist, his massive series. There's a magician in it. His name's Nakor, something like that, and he's managed to enchant his bag that he carries with him everywhere. That it has right over a shopkeep's produce bin that has apples in it. So he can reach through, and it's actually locked to a time period because they go through time, they go through hundreds of years and all that, but he always can reach through and always has an apple. Because he just reaches in and grabs. Except for at one point in time, wherever he has it locked, the merchant decided he was going to put oranges in it. And so all throughout that book, he's pulling out oranges. And through most of the books, no one really comments on it. But everyone in this book, I mean, even minor characters that you see just pop up here and there are like, why are you eating an orange? And he just always looks at him kind of sour. So,
Nice. So overall, the game you said is 80% done. When do you plan on seeing it hitting Kickstarter?
Well, like I said, it's kind of
that's the tough question.
Ready when it's ready. I would say it's safe to say first half of next year.
Okay. So it's still a ways
earlier if possible. Yeah, because even if playtesting is done, I can continue to just kind of fine tune. And there's also, I've got a few things lined up for other people to help out with that is coming a little bit later in the year. And there's certain things that I'm trying to get in place specifically for November, because come November I'm going to start hitting conventions more, and I want to have a certain amount of stuff of things that I can take with me. So there's one of the things I'm looking to do as part of the Kickstarter is, to have a custom deck of cards that you can buy if you want. That's, has the Capers logo on the back and is done in a little bit of a 1920s style. And, I'm hoping to have a rudimentary version of that for November so that I can print one deck to take with me when I run convention demos.
Right.
So I can say, okay, here's what the front cover looks like. I mean, I literally got a sketch for the front cover illustration today, when I was coming home from work.
Perfect.
So the front cover is coming together. So I'm going to have a booklet that people can sit down at the table, and it's got the front cover on it. It's got the everything inside laid out just kind of through Word, not fancy, nice laid out. That's still getting worked on. But here's a deck of cards. This is, they start to get a little bit of a package of what the whole thing's going to look like. And if you just want to, it'll be like Murders and Acquisitions. If you just want to get the PDF, you can just get the PDF. You don't have to get the cards. You don't have to buy a book.
Right. Which makes sense. And I think, we've talked to a lot of the RPG folks, pretty much all of them. We've mentioned it at some point or another on the podcast about the fact that nowadays, especially with the role-playing game world, with drive-through RPG and all those, the idea of the physical book, I mean, it's still cool. It's there for people that want it, but it's not like it used to be where people looked at PDFs or, digital versions of the book as oh, that's a cute thing. Now it's almost flip-flop where people are like, okay, yeah, I'll take the PDFs all day long, and maybe I'll pick up the book at a later point.
Right. Now that there's, basically, I think what it came down to is the good tablets in the last 5 years or so has killed the book thing, because especially if I'm going over to a buddy's house, I don't mind lugging a few books with me. But if I go to a convention, do I want to lug around 6 books because I'm going to play 6 games? No, I want the PDFs on my Kindle or on my iPad, and I'm good to go. And I can save all that space in my bag for stuff that I can buy in the convention hall.
Right, which will be more books, and then it's just a vicious cycle anyway.
So, I mean, the options are all there, and with print on demand through Drive-Thru RPG or various other sources, you can get a book that's pretty solid, physical book. It's not going to be the kind of book that you see from an offset print run where if you got a company that runs thousands of copies. much better. That'll have a much better binding. They'll probably be, the color will be a little deeper, that kind of stuff. But you can get a pretty darn good book through print on demand nowadays.
Yeah.
And for a very good price.
Right, because I know for the longest time that was the biggest barrier to entry on the whole print on demand thing. It's like, okay, so I bought the PDF for $20. I'm just whipping numbers out there, but like the hardcover book was $30, but by the time I buy the PDF for $10 off and I go to print the book, they're going to charge me an additional $20 to print the book.
Yep.
I'm now spending $10 more than what I would have if I would have just got the hard copy to begin with. But we are starting to see a lot of the change on that. So, and again, like you were saying, it kind of has like it's good and bad. Like me personally, I've talked about it a few times. Like if we're playing at my house, I don't mind having all the books here. I just don't want to take those books elsewhere. Right. If I were at Gen Con today and for this weekend and playing RPGs, there's no way in hell I would be taking any books with me. If it was not on my tablet, it's not going with me. Right. And somebody else better have the books or, access in some way, shape, or form.
And it opens up the market. Like, for example, my business model would not exist without drive-through RPG and print on demand.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Nerdburger Games I wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't a good way, an easy way to distribute PDFs that, many people can find and to print books as well. I mean, I could do just PDF, but I still like, I want to, it's nice to have a hardcover book that you can take and you can open it up. You can flip easily, quickly between pages. It's hardcover, so it sits open on the table nicely. It doesn't want to close back up on itself like soft covers can, unless they're, much bigger or you crack the binding. It's like Drive-Thru RPG serves both types of players. It serves the people who want the book, the people who want the PDF. And it's the reason that Nerdburger Games can even do what it does. Right.
Which, wave of the future, man. I've told a lot of people that is like, the traditional ways of publishing, they're not there anymore. It's not that they're not there. It's just, it's not the be all and end all. You don't have to go out and, spend thousands upon thousands of dollars in order to get a book printed and then shipped over here. And then the logistics of everything. It's, especially like in the RPG world, like you said, you could put it up as a PDF, and if people want it, they could do a print on demand by the click of a button. It's still good. They still get your product. You didn't have to do anything more on your side of like logistics or shipping or any of that nonsense that goes along with it. So
I'm in an apartment. Where am I going to store?
Right. Exactly.
400 books.
I don't know. I've
seen
some
to
people fulfilling Kickstarters, and they find some creative places in those apartments to store this stuff.
Fulfilling a Kickstarter, and just taking up part of your living room with boxes and shipping materials and everything for a month or whatever it takes to fulfill, that's one thing. But if you get like an offset print run done and you shoot over, by like 400 books, and now you're going to just try to sell those via your online store or take them with you to conventions. Well, now you got to stack 400 books somewhere in your apartment for a year or two, or however long it takes you to sell all that stuff. And if there are people that are doing it, and those people have houses, those people have garages and basements and third bedrooms that they're not using, and but I live in an apartment building. I don't have the space for that. So Drive-Thru RPG all the way, print on demand. Woohoo!
Shameless plug for Drive-Thru RPG accomplished.
Oh, absolutely.
Nice.
So I guess speaking of Drive-Thru RPG, in that you can find your books there. You have been nice enough to give us a discount code for anybody who wants to buy the PDF of Murders and Acquisitions.
Yeah.
So that
you'll post that in the places.
That will be posted in the places along with the episode.
Cool.
So that's I believe it's a 20% off the PDF version of Murders and Acquisition.
Yep, $12. And it's just for, as a to let you know, it's 176 pages, fully self-contained game. Everything you need to play is right in there, and there's also a bunch of free PDF support material that's there. And if you don't want to just dive into spending your hard-earned $12 right away, there's also a 30-page free quick start guide that basically, like, here's the basics of the game, here's an adventure, and here's some pre-generated characters.
Perfect. So people have their options. They can dip their toe.
Yep, and then get a sense of what the game's about, and for nothing, for no money, and then jump on and grab the PDF for $12 if they so choose. That discount link is not good forever, folks. It'll be good for a month or so. But
that means the moment it goes live, you better get it. So
yep.
Awesome. Well, this is pretty much going to wrap up where we can take this episode. But Craig, tell us, where can we get a hold of you at? Your Instagram, Twitter, Facebooks, and the websites, and the www dots and all that good stuff.
You can go to nerdburgergames.com for all sorts of game stuff. I blog on there every couple weeks with just kind of ongoing updates of what's going on with Capers, as well as a few other things. There's information about mergers and acquisitions, of course. There's information about conventions that I'll be going to. You can go to nerdburgershow.com for the little podcast that I do with my friend Mike, which is just kind of a nerdy, geeky potpourri of discussion, all slathered over with a lot of humor. That's been running for over 4 years now. Geez, wow. And new episodes come out on every Wednesday. On Twitter, I am at Nerdburger Craig.
At Nerdburger Craig.
Yeah, that's exactly the number of characters you can have, right?
Well, yeah. I know that Skirmish Supremacy is too big for Twitter.
Yeah, because I just barely fit mine. Yeah,
but Skirmish Supreme is not.
Sure, and if you go to nerdburgergames.com, there's a contact page, and that points you at all that other stuff too. So, if nothing else, go to nerdburgergames.com and dig around there. You'll find everything else you need to know.
Excellent. Well, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of Skirmish Supremacy, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. To see more of the antics that Nick and I do, you can check us out on Facebook at Skirmish Supremacy. We also have Twitter, which we can be reached at Skirmish Supreme, because apparently Skirmish Supremacy does not fit in Twitter. And if you want to email us directly, you can reach us at tim@skirmishsupremacy.com or nick@skirmishsupremacy.com. Thanks for listening.